Welcome. This lesson is over how to divide fractions part 2. So in our number routine, you are given a card. You're going to walk around the classroom and you are going to find your reciprocal match. And you're going to tell them everything you know about how to divide fractions. So for example, maybe you were given the card 3/4. The reciprocal is 4/3. Or maybe you were given the card 5 whole. The reciprocal is 1/5 because 5 whole can be written in fraction form as 5/1. So what is reciprocal? Reciprocal is when you multiply the original fraction by its reciprocal, it equals 1 whole. So 3/4 found its reciprocal of 4/3. So now they're going to talk about how do you divide fractions? Some of them say, I forgot. Then I may ask them, so why did I ask you to find the reciprocal match? What do you think the reciprocal has to do with dividing fractions? Hopefully it will jog some memory from the previous lesson. The previous was a more interactive lesson where you had to go to a website and find how many groups of this go into that. For example, how many groups you have 1 and 1/2, such as this. Here's 1/2 divided 4. How many groups of 3/4 go into 1 and 1/2? So let's see. One group of, and then a second group. So the way you divide, here's another example. You may have 3/4 divided by 1/4. So here's 3/4. How many groups? Oh, here's 3/4. How many groups of 1/4 you have? One group, two groups, three groups. So you keep the original fraction, you multiply by its reciprocal, so it'd be 4/1. It's 12/4, which is just 3 whole. Or in the video, they say you invert, which is doing the reciprocal 1/4, and you multiply. All right, so here is a video. Giada.
My passion for cooking started with my family, and there are dishes we always love making together. Spinach and pancita strata is one, a savory bread pudding with pancita and spinach. Mascarpone cheesecake with almond crust is the creamiest dessert you can imagine.
Cheesecake. Giada is a famous cook, celebrity chef on the Food Network. She is known for her contemporary and traditional Italian food. So in this one, she's making cheesecake. So Giada made 1.5 cheesecakes at the first taping and 3/4 at the second taping. She gave each audience member 3/8 of a whole cake. Determine how many audience members received a gift. Show multiple representations. So she gave 1.5 cheesecakes. Then her second taping, she made 3/4 more. So 1/4, 2/4, 3/4. So this is how much cake she gave away. So she gave away 2 and 1/4 cheesecakes away. However, some of you may know the mathematical on this one. 1.5 cheesecake she made at her first taping. Then she made 3/4 cheesecake on her second taping. Can I rewrite 1 and 1/2 using fourths? 1 and 2/4 plus 3/4 adds up to 1 and 5/4. And we know 5/4 is improper. Another way to say it is 1 and 1/4. And that's where you get 2 and 1/4. Again, multiple representation. There is nothing wrong with drawing a picture because it does say use arithmetic or modeling. So now, this is how much cheesecake she gave away. 2 and 1/4. 1, 2, 1/4. Each audience member received eighths. So let's divide each one of these into eighths. And did they each get an eighth of a slice? I believe they each got 3/8 of a cake. So it's like 3 slices. So let's use our highlighter feature. So the first audience member got 3/8 of a cake. Yay, good for them. The second audience member got 3/8 of a cake. Our next audience member got 3/8 of a cake. Our next audience member got 3/8 of a cake. Our next audience member got 3/8 of a cake. And our last audience member got 3/8 of a cake. Let's count how many audience members that is. 1 group, 2 group, 3 group, 4 group, 5 group, 6 groups. So 6 audience members. 6 audience members received 3/8 of a whole cake. Could I do this more mathematical with arithmetic? So we started with 2 and 1/4 cheesecake. We're dividing it into groups because each audience member got a partition group, 3/8 slice. Are we learning how to divide fractions? We are, aren't we? Is this in fractional form? No, it's not. How can you write this as a rational number or in fractional form? 4 times 2 is 8. 1 more is 9/4. Now, what do you remember about dividing fractions now? You keep the original quantity, you multiply by its reciprocal. That's 72 12, you multiply across, and 12 going to 72 6 times. And that is how you do it arithmetic. So we did it through using fraction circles, and we use it through arithmetic. So what we're going to be learning today is practicing more with fraction towers until you are comfortable with arithmetic. Jamie is painting her house. Each room takes half a liter of paint. If Jamie has 2.5 liters of paint, how many rooms can she paint? Use fraction towers to model. How many groups of 1/2s go into 2 and 1/2? So first of all, we need 1, 2 and a halves. How many halves go into 2 and a halves? Groups of halves. 1 group, 2 group, 3 group, 4 group, and 5 groups. So 5. How many halves? If I have 2.5 and I divide it into groups of halves, it'll be 5 groups. Can I do this more mathematical? Do you know another way to rewrite 2 and 1/2 as fraction form? 5/2 divided by 1/2. Now we need to rewrite problem as an equivalent multiplication expression. So 5/2, keep the original fraction, times what's the reciprocal of 1/2? 2, 1. And you get 10/2 equal 5. And according to our model, it does work. On one Saturday night, Belinda took home 1 1/2 cakes from a party. For several nights, she sneaked downstairs at midnight for a snack like a gremlin. At each snacking, she ate 3/10 of the original cake. For how many nights did the cake last? Use fraction towers to model. How many groups of 3/10 go into 1 1/2? So I need 1 1/2 cheesecakes. But I want to know how many tenths go in it. So I'm going to exchange. You know what? You know what? I am just going to do it by hand. So I'm going to exchange this 1 whole with tenths. So 10/10 is equal to 1 whole. Do you remember that when we were teaching how to add and subtract regrouping? And then exchange 1/2, which is equivalent to 5/10. So how many groups of 3/10 go? So let's see. 1 group of 3/10, 2 groups of 3/10, 3 groups of 3/10, 4 groups of 3/10, 5 groups. So how many groups of 3/10 go into 1 and 1/2? 5 groups. So let's see if we could do this a division problem. So we started with the original cakes of 1 and 1/2. She divided into 3/10 because it's how many slices she ate every night. How can I rewrite this in fractional form? 3/2 divided by 3/10. Because 2 times 1 is 2 plus 1 more is 3/2. Now I need to rewrite problem as an equivalent multiplication expression. So it's 3/2 times the reciprocal. So I need to find the reciprocal of 3/10, which is 10/3. And if I multiply this, you get 30 over 6, or divide by 6, which is 5 whole. So 30 divided by 6 is 5 whole. Mrs. Meyer plans to make 5 lemon meringue pies for the Myers family reunion. She plans to give each loved one 1 and 1/4 pies. How many relatives will receive pie? So she's going to have 5 pies. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Each relatives get what again? 1 and 1/4. I'm going to exchange this whole pie into fourths. So each family member gets 1 and 1/4 pies. 1 and 1/4 pies. 1 and 1/4 pies. 1 and 1/4 pies. So that means the answer is 4. How many groups of 1 and 1/4 go into 5? 4. So let's write that as a division problem. So that's 1. So she started with 5 pies. She's dividing into 1 and 1/4 partition, groups of 1 and 1/4. Can I rewrite this as as fractional form? 5 over 1, because remember, a 1 goes underneath a whole number, divided by, this would be 5/4. Now rewrite problem as an equivalent multiplication expression. 5, 1 times the reciprocal. So I did the reciprocal of this one. So now I get 25ths or 4. And let's look at our model. Yep, 4 members got 1 and 1/4 pies. Last question. Lourdes got a plant as a birthday gift. Her plant grows an average of 1 2/5 inches every month. How long will it take for the plant to grow a full 10.5 inches? Before I even start, let's try to estimate. So the plant is 10.5 inches tall. We want to know how many groups of 1 2/5 go into 10 1/2. So if I drew it 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 and a half, and I divided this one into fifths and this one into fifths, let's try to estimate. I'm not going to find an answer. I'm just going to estimate right now. So 1 2/5. The plant grew this tall in the first month. 1 2/5. The plant grew this tall in the second month. 1 2/5. The plant grew this tall in the third month. 1 2/5. The plant grew this tall in the fourth month. 1 2/5. The plant grew this tall in the fifth month. The plant grew this tall in the 6 months. So the plant grew this tall in the 7th month. So I estimate it's about 7-ish, 7 and a fractional part. So let's see. So 10 1/2. How would you write that in fraction form? 2 times 10 is 20 plus 1 more is 21 halves. Divided by 1 2/5 would be 7/5. I need to multiply by its reciprocal. So 21 halves times, what is the reciprocal of 7/5? 5/7. So 21 times 5 is 105, I believe. And 2 times 7, 14. How many groups of 14 go into 105? Well, in our model, we said about 7 times. Let's see if that is a good choice. 14 groups of 7 is 98. If you subtract this, That's 9. 7 is remainder. How can I get rid of this remainder? Annex a 0. Bring it down. How many groups of 14 go into 70? 14, 28. Let's see, 14, 28. Let's see, 12, 42, 56, 70. 5 groups. So the answer is 7 and 5/10, or 7 1/2. So it takes about 7.5 months for it to grow 10.5 inches. In your own words, how do you divide mixed numbers? So the first thing you need to do is, number one, write it in fraction form. So if it's a mixed number or a whole number, you need to write it in fraction form. Number two, you keep the original fraction. You change the division to multiplication. And then next thing is you find the reciprocal of the second fraction. And in step 5, you multiply and simplify if needed. Oh, multiply across and simplify if needed. For example, let's see if this really does work. So if I have 3, 4, let's do 1.5 divided by 3/4. That was my original question in the beginning class, beginning of the lesson. Turn this into fraction form as 3/2 divided by 3/4. Change the division to multiplication. Then I find the reciprocal of the second one. That'll be 4/3. That'll be 12 6. Simplifying it, 2 whole. Let's see if that's correct. You have 1.5. Divide these into fourths. How many groups of 3/4 do you see in 1 1/2? Using my highlighter, I see 1 group. Oh goodness, you can't even see this. 1 group, 2 groups. And that's how you divide fractions.